Alaskans, wherever you are, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. I hope everybody's having a phenomenal summer. I know I am. I've gone RVing with the family, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. Got 2 or 3 more trips planned out. If you listen, watch, and read Must Read Alaska, I want to thank you. If you want to help keep the lights on, just go to mustreadalaska.com. And on the right-hand side, there's a little donate button. Every $5, $10, $100 helps keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. But without further ado, we have a very special guest today. Corey DeAngelis is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children and a visiting fellow at Stanford University. He has been labeled the school choice evangelist and has been called one of the most effective school choice advocates since Milton Friedman. He is a regular guest on Fox News, and he has written a book, folks, and the book is pretty awesome. It is entitled The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. Corey, without further ado, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show.
Hey, John, thanks so much for having me.
Well, this will be fun. I'm excited to hear a little bit about your story, hear about the book, and hear about why you're coming up to Alaska. But first, you've been called one of the most effective school choice advocates since Milton Friedman. Can you share with me what initially sparked your passion for educational reform and school choice advocacy?
Yeah, I actually started as a researcher at the University of Arkansas. My first study looked at the Milwaukee voucher program. It started in 1990. And my co-author and I found that using the school choice program, getting a better educational opportunity through that voucher program led to a reduction in crime later on in life. We were able to follow the students using student level data till they were about 25 to 30 years of age. So it was a long-term study that kind of thrust me into the national spotlight. I thought about going into academia until I found out that I'd be just going against the grain. It was an uphill battle with the Marxists who control the higher education system. I still managed to publish 30 to 40 peer-reviewed articles, but I ended up going into the private sphere, going to think tanks. Now I'm at the American Federation for Children. But my first kind of experience with school choice was actually myself. I went to government schools all K through 12. But in high school, I had the opportunity to go to something called a magnet school. So it's a school of choice. You're not assigned to it. They can have admissions processes and a specialized mission. And they don't have as much monopoly power because they have to attract their customers since you're not assigned to magnet schools. And that was a good opportunity for me. And I think other families should have educational opportunities too. I also got into this through the lens of an economist. I did my bachelor's and master's in economics, and I found out really quickly that one of the biggest or the most pernicious areas of monopoly power happens to be the government-run school system. I mean, just imagine if you were assigned to your nearest grocery store or restaurant and you couldn't go anywhere else, and you had to move houses if you wanted something else. I mean, they could serve you rotten food, expired food, give you food poisoning. They might have empty shelves. And if you didn't like it, it's basically too bad. They could say, oh, you can go complain to the board. That doesn't really work out too much. That doesn't really work out too well. We saw that during COVID with the school boards. The unions always told us that if we didn't like what we were getting with the public school system, that they were democratically accountable, that we could just show up and complain and they would listen to us. They didn't listen to us. They only wanted to hear from us if we actually agreed with them. Once they realized that we were unhappy, they tried to mobilize the FBI, the federal government, to try to bully and silence parents into submission. It's true. The National School Boards Association sent a letter to Biden implying that parents, under the Patriot Act of all things, should be labeled as quote unquote domestic terrorists. And earlier drafts of their letter to Biden actually called for the military to be deployed, the National Guard and the military to be deployed to school board meetings to tell parents to sit down and shut up. I'm glad parents didn't listen. They were only emboldened to push back even harder. And that's the story of hope in the parent revolution, is that when parents band together and lock arms, they can beat the unions at their own game. The book's now a national bestseller. It was recently endorsed by President Trump. And if you want to take Ted Cruz's advice, senator from my home state of Texas, he says on the back, quote, "You can ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book." She's the school closer. She's the head of the AFT, lobbied the CDC to make the schools closed as long as possible. They overplayed their hand because families got to see what the hell was going on in the schools through the Zoom school situation.
Yeah, most of them didn't like what they were seeing, right?
That's right. I mean, the schools are focusing more on indoctrination than education. And parents who even thought that the schools were okay before, they thought, hey, look, I'm in an A-rated school. Maybe it's a national blue ribbon school, or maybe my kid's just coming home with all A's on the report card. They thought things were fine before, but then they realized, hold on just a second. Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the parents aren't surprised anymore. They're upset. And now, thankfully, we have 12 states with universal school choice. Milton Friedman's vision for education freedom finally coming to fruition right before our eyes. And it's the union's own fault. They fear-mongered every step of the way. They held children's education hostage to secure billions of dollars in ransom payments since March of 2020. They received about $190 billion in so-called COVID relief over that time. That's more than the U.S. dedicated to rebuild Europe after World War II under the Marshall Plan in real terms. It's insane how much money we've thrown at the problem. It's a definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Have the outcomes gotten any better? No, they haven't. They've gotten worse. There's been decades of learning loss because of the union-induced school closures, and we spend about $20,000 per student per year now in the government-run school system, whereas private school tuition on average is about $12,000 or $13,000. We're not getting our money's worth. Parents know it, and the unions know it too. That's why they're so terrified of competition.
So you wrote a book on this, right? The Parent Revolution. Tell me what parents can do in your opinion, because I think a lot of parents feel like, what can I do? I mean, I got 2 jobs. I've got juggling sports. I can barely make, pay the bills, let alone, get worried about my kids' education and get involved. And, it's hard to get involved sometimes because the people running it make it extremely hard to produce any sort of change. So what can parents do?
Parents need to know who their friends are and lock arms with them to become a political force to be reckoned with. Look, the teachers' unions have done this forever. The adults have always had a union of their representing them in the school system. The teachers' unions, the superintendents' unions, all these government unions using your taxpayer dollars to lobby against your rights as parents. Well, guess what? Parents can beat the unions at their own game. And I hope when people read The Parent Revolution, they'll see that there's a lot of stories of success. We saw that after the NSBA sent that letter labeling parents as terrorists, because parents didn't sit down and shut up, because parents fought back, because parents kept showing up and taking that energy to the ballot box, 26 states have left the National School Boards Association. 12 states have universal school choice. And before COVID, there's a lot of social media putting a spotlight on the problems in the government school system, parents thought that they were powerless. They thought that they were the only ones that were upset. And so they were afraid to stick their necks out. They didn't want to go to the school board meeting, be the only one to complain, and then have their kids be bullied at school or have their retaliation from the district against their kids. So there was a coordination problem before, as economists would put it. But now, because parents through social media have seen that there are other parents that feel the same way, they are feeling more emboldened to form a union of their own, one for the kids, one that's actually more of a general interest as opposed to a special interest protecting a monopoly. Parents are fighting for the right to educate their own kids as they see fit. And look at what happened with Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. It's a perfect example. He was the former governor in a state that apparently went 10 points to Biden the year before. In 2021, Terry McAuliffe said at the final debate, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." That was he let the mask slip and he quadrupled down on his anti-parent rhetoric up until election night. The night before the election, he actually had Randy Weingarten stumping for him. The school closer was his campaign closer, and Glenn Youngkin leaned into parental rights as a political winner. The Republican won on the issue of education. That basically never happens. Democrats have had a decades-long double-digit advantage on education, but Glenn Youngkin won by 6 points with those voters, and that was the number 2 issue in that election. That was that is a blueprint for success for Republicans going forward. And in my book, I detail in chapter 4 something I call bipartisanship through hyperpartisanship. It seems counterintuitive. How can something be polarizing lead to something that's bipartisan? Well, the thing is, politicians only care about power and politics. They don't really respond to logic or morality as much as we'd like. But the more that the GOP wins on the issue, the more it'll become a form of political suicide for Democrats to oppose it. And I lay out example after example of Democrats starting to defect on the issue of school choice, including in Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro right before the election in 2022. He was the attorney general at the time, up by double digits in the polls. He included private school choice in his education platform right before the election, right after his opponent, Doug Mastriano, the Trump-backed candidate, started calling him a hypocrite, saying, you know, Josh, you went to private school. You sent your kids to private school. I support school choice. Why are you a hypocrite? Why don't you support it for other families? Well, Josh Shapiro took that argument away from Doug by including school choice in his platform. He went on Fox News reiterating his support last year, and there's still conversations in the works to try to get Pennsylvania to pass school choice too. But at the end of the day, that a high-profile Democrat, and this isn't the only one, I go over other examples in the book, that he felt compelled to signal support for school choice, whether it was a true change of heart or not, that's good news for families in the end. It means the political winds are shifting towards parents and away from the status quo. And that's why this momentum is going to continue. But it relies on parents becoming a political force to be reckoned with.
So for folks listening in that maybe don't know what school choice is, can you explain it to us in the most simplistic terms? Because I think, I think a lot of folks, I've asked people in the unions and teachers, about school choice. And I think sometimes the reply is, well, everybody has school choice. You can go to public schools or you can go to private schools. It's your choice. This is something way different. So can you explain school choice for folks that maybe have never heard it?
Yeah, not everybody has school choice. The most advantaged have school choice in the sense that they can live in the fanciest neighborhoods assigned to the best quote unquote public schools. We really shouldn't even call them public schools. They're government run schools, because families, you can't access it like a public park. Like, you can't just go to the best schools based on your decisions, right? Families have gone to jail for lying about their address to get into better so-called public schools. They're not accountable to the public. We saw how that democratic accountability works. And they're not public goods according to the economic decision. They're rivalrous and excludable, and they do exclude kids. And some of them even charge tuition. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I found out that there's a district right next to mine. They're charging families $10,300 per student per year for the privilege to sending their kids to these so-called public schools if you're from another district. And they have all of these reasons as to why they can exclude the kid based on academics or disciplinary issues. So they are not public schools. They are government-run schools. And the way that I would define school choice is any initiative or policy that allows families to take their kids' taxpayer-funded education dollars to a school other than their assigned government-run school. So that could be another government-run school. That's a form of school choice. It's public school choice. It could be a charter school. The funding can follow the child to a charter school, which is basically like a quasi-public, quasi-private entity. It's not run by the government, but they do have more regulations than private schools. And then most recently, where we've seen most of the momentum on the school choice front has been private school choice programs, where the money that's assigned to your kid that usually goes to an assigned school could now follow you to pay for private school tuition and fees. There's also education savings account programs where the money that would have followed you to the government school, you can still take it there. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school for real this time, unlike with your doctor. And the public schools do get better in response to competition. But if not, if you don't like that option for whatever reason, the money follows the student to a parent-directed education savings account, which could be used for private school tuition and fees, charter schools, homeschool tuition, homeschool curriculum, textbooks, private tutoring, micro school tuition, and so on and so forth. It's the basic concept of the money following the child.
Nice. Well, we were talking a little bit before we jumped on here, and you are coming to Alaska, which is very exciting. Talk to me about why you're coming up here and what the event is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll be there Monday, July 8th at the Lakefront Anchorage, hosted by the Americans for Prosperity Alaska. And I'll be there at 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So again, Anchorage Lakefront, July 8th, which is a Monday. The first 100 people that attend will get a free copy of the book, The Parent Revolution, signed, obviously, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools. I actually dedicated the book to Randy Weingarten. Not a lot of people know this, but I sent her a copy. I dedicated the book to her for inadvertently doing more to advance school choice and homeschooling than anyone could have ever imagined. I mean, the unions have been stepping in it over and over again, showing their true colors, awakening a sleeping giant, parents who want more of a say in their kids' education. And we're winning on the issue so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning, John. Just kidding. We're not done yet. We've had 12 red states where we had 0 before. So it's a lot of momentum, more momentum on the school choice front in the past 3 years than in the preceding 3 decades put together. It's an insane amount of momentum. It's a time to be optimistic on the education freedom front. And so I'll be there to share that optimism with lawmakers and members of the public in Alaska. Again, the first 100 people that make it to the Lakefront Acreage at 5 p.m. on Monday, July 8th, you'll get a free signed copy of the book.
Awesome. Well, folks listening in, I'll put a link in the podcast description to the book called The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radical Ruining of Our Schools. And folks, listen to this endorsement by President Trump himself. He says it's a great guide to help moms and dads take back control of their children's education from the radical Marxists ruining our schools. The first person to email me, John, JOHN, at mustreadalaska.com, I'm going to send them a copy of this book. There's going to be tons of people that email me, but the first one to do it is going to get a free copy of this book. Dr. Corey DeAngelis, any last minute thoughts here before we head off?
That's it. I got to correct you. I'm not a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. I got a Ph.D. in education policy. I don't have an important one. I can't help you with medical stuff. But no, just again, John, thank you so much for the opportunity and for giving one of your listeners a free copy of the book as well. That's very helpful. And thanks again for the opportunity to share more about the Parent Revolution.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much here for joining us on the Must Read Alaska show. For folks that listen, watch, and read Must Read Alaska, and you want to help keep the lights on, just go to mustreadalaska.com on the right-hand side. There's a little donate button. Every $5, $10, $100 helps keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. If you want to sponsor the Must Read Alaska show, the #1 podcast in Alaska, just email me, John, JOHN, at mustreadalaska.com. I hope everybody has a phenomenal rest of their week. Corey, thank you so much for joining us here on the Must Read Alaska show. Until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska. Thanks so much, Corey.
Thank you.